Greetings, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Federation's Most Wanted, a Blake 7 podcast. I'm the Preacher 711, and I'm on a mission to seek, locate, and interview fans from across the Blake 7 community. And if I sound a bit overexcited today, I'm absolutely thrilled to have the one and only Trevor Baxendale on the mic today. Hi, Trevor.
Hello, hi. Very pleased to be here.
So glad to have you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure everybody out there who listens to this podcast knows who you are. But if there's one minor person that doesn't, Trevor, do you want to sum up for us what you've been up to in the Blake 7 world over the last couple of years?
Well, I've written a couple of books and a fair few episodes of Blake 7 for Big Finish as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, I can give you details, but that might sound
we might save that for another day, maybe. But I've got to say that years ago now, I remember picking up Criminal Intent was the novel you'd written.
Yes, yeah.
And that's accompanied me on more than one summer holiday, I'll say. It's been a little bit read. There's a little bit of a worn copy behind me. Absolutely loved it. Fantastic.
Thank you.
But today we're going to run through our normal nerdy fan questions with you. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Go ahead.
Excellent. So how and when, sir, did Blake 7 come into your life?
Well, right at the beginning, 1978. I was, around 11 years old. I was madly into TV, adventure, fantasy, sci-fi stuff. Watched everything that came along. Doctor Who, of course. Space 1999. All of that stuff. Star Wars was, it was big in the news. It was on the horizon. I'm not sure that it actually came out in the UK until a little further into 78, or was it around about Christmas time? I can't remember. It was later than in the States, but there was an awful lot of talk about it. So my science fiction antenna were really buzzing for anything that was coming along. So I think it was trailed in the first Radio Times for that year. There was that picture of the cast looking up at the Liberator and a little box out, new science fiction series starting. And I was just so ready for it and up for it, and sat down to watch it. Immediately sort of entranced by that completely non-Doctor Who vibe that it had. It had a lot of the sort of like visual trappings of TV science fiction, BBC science fiction of the era, but it was definitely a sort of more adult, a more grim sort of world and experience to be drawn into. Yeah, loved it straight away.
Brilliant. And what series are you? What's the series you love the most? Identify with most, whatever your reasoning is, but what's that? When I say series of Blake 7, where does your mind jump to straight away?
I'm afraid probably sort of jumps to individual episodes and characters more than series, but I probably have to say series D, because I just love the whole sort of setup and feel of that series. And I can talk sort of more at length about that and why I like it, but I don't know, for that, I think the characters had really sort of like settled down. We had an interesting new sort of scenario and environment to work in, and I love all the series. Yeah, particularly I think in terms of the Blake episodes, probably series B more, but then series C, absolutely fascinating and brilliant turnaround for the series, carrying on without Blake. That was such an exciting time, and confusing as well. How is Blake 7 going to carry on without Blake? It was incomprehensible. But there was a sort of, even at that sort of relatively young age, I could sort of sense the excitement behind the BBC continuing to put its backing into a series without the main character. That immediately made it seem a bit special to me. And seeing Paul Darrow, obviously in hindsight, coming to the fore as the sort of main focus or the main character, or the leader, I should say, just seems so natural and right. It's almost like it's been planned rather than a sort of a quick, what are we going to do without Blake? We can carry on. We'll elevate Darrow's character to top man and carry on from there. With all the seeding that had gone on previously in the first two series with Avon v Blake, and always saying, I want this ship, I'm not interested in you and your crusade. It just seems so natural and so right for the series.
Absolutely, definitely. And would you say you're Team Blake or Team Avon?
Team Avon now. At the time, initially, Blake, because, well, he was the hero, he was the main character. He was clearly the guy who was going to bring down the Federation. He was somebody you could trust. He was somebody who knew the way things should be. Avon was sort of an annoying distraction because, he kept wanting to like either stop Blake or make him think again or question what he was doing all the time, which was sort of unheard of in a series like that at the time. To have that sort of very combative dynamic within the crew, and especially within those two very sort of like strong leading characters, leading men, I would say. I think that's what Gareth Thomas and Paul Darrow both had, is the ability to be leading men in that series. And to have that sort of conflict elevated and resolved in that way, it was quite unlike anything else that was out there. Of course, now that I'm older, when I got older, I realized that Avon was the one speaking common sense.
Absolutely.
And you see Blake as more of a sort of a flawed and not quite as dependable a character as you initially used to think.
Absolutely. I recently, well, I say recently, it's probably more than 10 years ago. It was rewatching Shadow, and I really, when I was young, I really don't remember Blake's sort of fanatical behaviour, jumping out. Certainly when I watched it as a kid when it was first aired, I didn't remember that level of fanaticism that he really grew into by series two.
Yeah,
and like you say, Avon kind of being that voice of reason in that, in that bit.
And not just that, but Gan sort of speaking up for the moral. Hang on, are we getting into bed with organized crime here? Is that really what we want to do? What we want to sort of be associated with? It's it's groundbreaking stuff, really. Absolutely. Of its time.
Yeah, it's definitely one I use for initiating, trying to get people interested in it. It's Shadow's kind of one of the ones I point them to because I think it's got a bit of everything and everybody gets a bit of screen time.
Yeah, it's very layered.
I'm going to insert an additional question at this point because cheekily, because I think it's pertinent to what we're talking about. But when you're writing the stories, is there a character you find particularly easier to write for, or someone you really enjoy writing about?
That's difficult. I mean, it sounds a bit boring to say that. I find them all quite easy to write for because they are so well drawn and so vivid on screen that it's very easy to sort of hear the thought processes, hear what they would say and how they would go about it in certain situations. So I don't really think about it from who's easier to write for, but they're all a pleasure to write for. Avon in particular, Avon talking with Villa is always so easy. You can just write pages and reams of script. And I know other authors have said this, other writers who've done scripts for Blake 7, that you can go on writing sort of liberator chat and discussion scenes page after page because it's so easy. You've got so many dynamic characters and viewpoints and ways in which they interact that you could spend a whole episode just with them sniping at each other on the bridge or on the flight deck of the Liberator. Servalan, very, very a great pleasure to write for. Yeah. And Travis too. I particularly liked particularly like writing for Travis because I love that episode Trial, where it's very clear at that point that, and I've said this before, that Travis sees himself, as every good villain should, as the hero of his particular story. He's the one who's doing the right thing. It's everybody else who's wrong. And it's very easy to get into his head from that point of view. And when I was writing Outlaw and the recent episode I did with Brian Croucher, it's really fascinating to sort of get into Travis's mind and to write it from his point of view, where he's trying to do the right thing by him or by the Federation, depending upon what part of his career he's at. Yeah, that was I did enjoy that a lot.
And what's your favorite episode or your go-to episode, your feel-good episode, however you want to put it to me? But when I say favorite, where does your mind jump?
I've got too many. I've got too many. To be honest, that's an unfair question. I did write something once on Power Play, which the second episode of the third season, because I think that's a particularly, and I remember it being absolutely gripping at the time when I first watched it, because there's a little bit of a whodunit going on. There's a little bit of a murder mystery. We've got that. It picks up exactly from that fantastic cliffhanger ending of Aftermath, where this is my ship. Avon and Dana at gunpoint on the Liberator, and you're sort of thinking, what the hell? Who are these people? And at that stage, you really don't know anything about Tarrant, or at least at that age and at that time watching, you didn't know anything about Tarrant compared to any of the other characters either. So it's gripping, it's engaging. Yeah, I love that episode. But there's so many others. I mean, you could just list episode after episode. Couldn't you say, yes, that's my favorite? No, that's my favorite.
It's a difficult. This is why, see, I'm the one asking the questions, not being asked, because I'd find it equally tough.
Yeah. I'd hate to be pinned down to a particular favorite episode, but yeah.
I was thinking there's a lot of mood involved in it as well. What mood am I in? Do I need a bit of an uplift?
Right,
Then it's if I just want I'm commuting back from London, turn my brain off and just have a bit of fun from the day, then it's something like Gold for me.
I was just about to say, yeah, I can watch Gold in any mood. Because that's such a great episode.
Such a great episode. Love it. And so on the other side of that, what's your least favorite episode? Not worst, but least favorite.
Well, it's Blake Seven, so I don't have a least favorite episode, but it's Bounty. Yeah, I just don't think that's an episode that works particularly well. I find it quite slow and unengaging. The Sarkov character is, I just don't like that sort of trapped in a castle in exile, away from everything. And it's almost like because he's away from everything, it doesn't seem to matter much, particularly as when you're quite young, you can't really sort of grasp, why is this chap so important to Blake? And then the escape with the vintage car and all of that, it just it looks to me like a cheap episode, and and it feels like a filler episode as well. And its one redeeming feature is probably the second string story on the Liberator with the Amagon pirates. And because whenever I rewatch Bounty, that's where I'm more fascinated by the Amagon pirates and Jenna's relationship to them and what's going on the Liberator. The B story is more interesting and gripping, and I did get the opportunity to write more about Amagon pirates.
So you did
in my episodes, and also Outlaw. But yeah, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, Amagon Queen. That was another great one. Yeah. Did you have to do a lot of Bounty rewatch in prep for that one, or?
I didn't.
All logged.
I just went on memory. Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. That's a bit more impressive then.
Yeah, I mean, there was talk at the time of trying to put because at one point in that story, Callie and Jenna changed clothes and they put on like Amazon pirate stuff, and they're going to try. I think they're going to try and do that on the cover, but I don't think it came off in the end. But it would have been nice to see that.
Yeah, definitely. That would have been cool. And would you say you're Liberator or Scorpio?
Scorpio. Yeah. And I'll tell you for why, because Liberator is a wonderful ship. It's the best ship. There's no doubt about it in science fiction. And from a design point of view, inside and out, there's nothing else like it. It's just wonderful. It's almost too wonderful. And it's too good for Blake and Avon. The thing is, the Liberator is it's so powerful and so effective that they had to keep finding ways. Terry Nation had to keep finding ways of sort of nobbling its power. So it was always like running out of fuel, or the guns have fired too many times. So they had to recharge the battery, because otherwise it's an unfair battle all the time. And what it also, I think, becomes in the story is that both Servalan and the president, by the time it comes to big finish, they want that ship because it's the most powerful ship in the galaxy. They want it more than anything. And I think it becomes a bit of a liability. And I think Avon realizes this, having hungered after the Liberator for so long. He finally gets it and he's in command of it. He has to spend so much time and energy keeping away from the Federation, keeping away from Servalan, which is what, he didn't want to have to be bothered with the Federation and Servalan, all that sort of stuff. He just wanted the ship. So what he finds is that it's actually a huge responsibility, because he has to keep it out of Servalan's hands. He has to. And I think that's why at the end of Terminal, when the Liberator gets destroyed, everybody walks away one by one looking grim. But then Avon turns to camera, walks off with a half smile on his face. And I just think he doesn't give a damn, because he's known in his mind for some time now that the Liberator actually is a bit of a millstone. It's too much responsibility. He's always having to fight off Servalan and the Federation getting their hands on it. I did allude to that a little bit in some of my episodes in the Redemption arc, where the Liberator gets badly destroyed and has to go to great difficulty and lengths to repair it, because it's not a ship you can easily get spares for.
Indeed.
So it becomes actually quite difficult and quite an exacting mission just to repair it. And I think he does say at one point to Dana and Villa that he'd rather scuttle the ship, he'd rather destroy it than let's get his hands on it ever. And I think that puts the seed in his brain then about how at some point this ship is going to have to be destroyed, because it's too powerful to let it fall into Servalan's hands. So I've talked only about the Liberator there. Whereas you asked me which is my favourite ship, and I said Scorpio. So what that does is it leads me on to then to Scorpio, which is fantastic design, lovely looking ship in that very sort of ugly nuts and bolts way. I even like the flight deck. And I love its contrast to the Liberator, and I love the fact that, but at this point, Avon has decided, right, we're going to take on the Federation now. We're going to take on Servalan in particular, because we've got to get to grips with this, because he has a bit of a change of attitude in Series B. He becomes much more proactively involved in trying to stop the Federation. But he's now no longer got the Liberator to do that with. He's just got Scorpio and like the worst looking spaceship that he could possibly get, and he has to make a few modifications to it, but it's nowhere near the Liberator.
No.
But it makes it a more of a heroic fight for
Definitely.
Avon and his crew, because now they're having to do it with only the most basic tools.
Absolutely, and it made that kind of almost constant running away you alluded to earlier, like more believable as well. It was like you say, there was always that bit with the Liberator of why is the default action always run? Three pursuit
Yes.
ships coming, let's run. And you think you just in the last verse you just told us that it was the most powerful warship in the galaxy. Why are we
Yeah.
running? Yeah, it definitely did add a lot more sort of credibility to that. I love the rusty look of the Scorpio. She looks great, especially
It's fantastic. Yeah, I love it.
those shots, and they happen a few times in, I think, like Rescue and Star Drive, where you had it landed as well. I love those long shots of the model sat there on a
Yes, yeah,
landscape.
that was particularly exciting. Is yes, a ship you could land, and
Yeah,
yeah, I really like that. It
yeah,
brought a very sort of well, I don't want to draw parallels to the Millennium Falcon, but it brought that sort of um, that kind of spaceship atmosphere to the whole thing. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. And your comment earlier about that, even loving the flight deck, I always loved the difference between the way they did it. That it looks so human, the flight deck. It looks so
yes,
functional and as we would probably build something, as opposed to the Liberators, conceptually
that's right.
alien design.
The
I loved
Liberator
it.
looked as beautiful inside as it did outside, which was just
Mm.
right. And this Scorpio looks as ugly inside
Yeah,
as you'd expect. It's so functional and just great. Yeah, love it.
yeah, brilliant. Travis 1 or Travis 2?
Oh, I really can't choose there. It's they are they are wonderfully different, and again, sort of. I tried to allude to why there is such a difference when I wrote Outlaw
Mm,
and Travis's sort of thinking back over various points in his life. Uh, and I do address that sort of that time he spent in psycho rehab,
mm.
psycho training, or whatever it was. And they're both completely different, but I love them both to bits. Yeah, you can't separate one from the other in their respective series, can you?
Not really.
Stephen Greif is just perfect for Series A, but there's no doubt about it. Croucher is the right one for Series B.
I've always had this little weakness for Croucher in Gambit, Gunslinger Travis. I think that was a hell of a look. I love
Yeah, yeah.
that. It was brilliant.
I always think that episode is sort of like begging for more. Actually,
Mm,
we don't get to see enough of what's going on elsewhere.
yeah.
There's almost I wouldn't say a two-parter exactly, but whenever I watch Gambit, I'm always frustrated because it looks like it's a sort of 50-minute episode that's been edited down from it really needs to be about an hour and 10 minutes.
There was a
It's
thing
like
back in
20
the
minutes of footage missing.
I'm going to say back in the 90s, they did a load of like Star Wars spin-off novels before there was prequels, sequels, and whatever, and we were just living off the scraps from the table. They did a series that was like Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina, and I remember
Yes.
being gifted that book. And I remember not particularly enjoying a lot of it, but reading it thinking it could be Tales from the Cantina in Gambit. Who's that guy sitting over there in the
Yes.
corner? What's his story?
Yeah.
I'd love a bit of that. There you go. Big
Yeah.
Finish. You can have that one for free. Tales from the Gambit
Tales
Canteen.
from Space City or whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it'd be brilliant. Anyway, there we go. So my favourite little question now is the one I always love getting to. So Gouda Prime, laser bolts going everywhere. People are dropping like flies. But who survived the shootout? Did anybody survive? Trevor, tell me.
For a long, long time in my mind's eye, the only character I'd put a question mark over would be Avon because we don't actually see him being shot. I know there's a lot of discussion over whether the rest of the crew was shot with stun weapons or killed. To me, watching it, for a long time. I think the intention is that they're killed, and it sort of suits the grimness of Blake 7. And also, Federation troopers aren't exactly renowned for using stun weapons.
Mm.
And I'm not quite sure why, having lured them into that trap, they would want to stun them. What are they planning to do with them afterwards? I can't see them putting them on trial or anything like that. The Federation is well beyond that with this crew. So I don't actually understand the sort of theory behind the story theory behind them being stunned. I can understand them wanting to make it a bit ambiguous just in case the series comes back the following year, so they can pick up the threads with. I think Chris Boucher's intention was that he'd leave it ambiguous so that they could pick it up if necessary the next year, keep on whatever characters wanted to stay doing the series, and quietly let go, as in dead, anybody who wanted to leave. And that's eminently sensible, but that's not what happened. And I love that ending.
Oh yeah,
I love the ending, and I love the fact that it closes on Paul Darrow with a slight smile. The sirens going off, the red light, the troopers coming in, the sound of the gun blasts. Who knows what happened? You see, I like to think that probably immediately after that, Servalan swept in to the room and ordered them not to shoot.
Okay.
So in my mind, Avon, definite survivor. Aurak, obviously. After that, I don't know. I'm a little bit more sort of relaxed now about people offering up their interpretations of what happened next, whether it's Paul Darrow's Lucifer trilogy of books, right back to I must have a read of Tony Atwood's book, or what was that called?
Afterlife.
Afterlife, yeah, Afterlife. I must have a read of that, and I think there's Vindictus as well, which I'm quite interested to see what happened for that. Purely just out of curiosity, but it's not because I sort of wholly believe in one particular version of what happened afterwards than others. I love that uniqueness of that ending. I love the fact that Blake 7 stopped like that. It's one of the things that makes it the sort of iconic show that it is.
Absolutely. It's one of the things I feel so fractured about, the part of me that is, as you rightly say, it's the perfect ending to that show. Could you ever win against this galactic fascism? No,
Yes.
not six people against that. That's never going to work. So it was the perfect ending, but that didn't mean that as a fan, you didn't constantly hope for more, especially just after it aired. And I think I've mentioned on it a couple of times before, that you mentioned the Atwood book. They announced that sort of shortly afterwards, and I remember, going to my local WH Smith's before ever there was the internet and asking to order it, and you needed the ISBN number and waiting for my notification that it had arrived, and go and collecting it and binge reading it on a Saturday afternoon. I read the whole book in the afternoon. I remember that.
You see, I explicitly avoided reading that book because, to my mind, it wasn't. It was one person's sort of conjecture of what might have happened. It didn't feel. It didn't feel official. It wasn't on TV. It wasn't Blake 7 series. So therefore, I dismissed it as non-canonical even before I understood what that sort of meant in my mind. But I'm a little bit more relaxed about it now. So
yeah, and I think it's one of those things that you can take them or leave them, and whatever really. But like I say, I do always, as much as I do love. I mean, I really enjoyed the recent one, the Vindictus. There's bits of Darrow's ones I enjoyed. There's even a bit of Afterlife I quite enjoyed, but my brain still goes back to no, they're all dead. And I've got to say that without my son listening to this podcast, because he totally disagrees that Villa would be dead. Ever since I first showed him it as a little boy, he was adamant that
some people get very heated about it, don't they? And everybody wants their favorite characters to survive. And it's almost unthinkable that Villa shouldn't. And I get why people say, well, no, he can't be dead. He won't be dead. And he does have a great final scene.
Does.
Where he backfists the
Yeah,
guard and takes the gun and
absolutely.
shoots it. I love it. That's the aspect of Villa's character that I love the most, when he shucks off the cowardice and
Yes.
shows that he's a ratty little survivor.
Yep.
No matter what the odds. That harked right back to that very first episode he's in, where
Yes.
he's much more sort of the Artful Dodger type.
Yeah.
The cowardice, I think it was genuine. He really did fear for his life and not want to get involved in dangerous situations. And in that respect, he speaks for a lot of us when we're watching Blake Seven. But I always love the moments where he sort of shows a little bit of steel, even if it's just because it's his own survival instinct
Yes.
kicking in.
I've always loved it when, like you say, you're shown that he is supremely intelligent. He's a very, very clever man and a very skilled man. But,
Yes.
he just likes to keep that in reserve. He doesn't want to offer out that help sort of too often. Otherwise, like you say, he will end up in the line of fire all the time. I think he's brilliant. I love those little moments, though, usually privately, usually when other characters aren't around, when he really gets to show his abilities.
Yeah, because he is a master thief and lockpicker, and he knows that. And I like it when he does any of that sort of business. He's suddenly really confident,
Mm.
and because he knows what he's doing, and he knows that nobody else can do it. And I tried to do a little scene like that in my first one. It wasn't my first one. My first Blake Seven for Big Finish. It was the second one. The Refuge second episode on one of the box sets, where he's talking to an old sort of pal of his, and he's been left to guard him, and he sort of turns the tables on him in a very Villa-esque way, because he's been able to the pocket and spot things, because it's one thief to another, and he knows how the guy's going to think, so he knows how to keep one step ahead of him, because he is very clever.
Absolutely. So, last little question on my sheet here, sir, that I'm going to ask you is, what's your B7 wish? If you could make anything happen for us fans, what would you like to see happen? Merch, continuations, what would it be?
A really good Blu-ray set would be fantastic, but whether or not that can be done now, I don't know. I don't know whether the sort of the money and finance is there for the proper restoration that needs. I'm talking about sort of like the Doctor Who, the collection series. I want it with that level of love, care, and attention. But that costs a lot of money, and I don't know whether it will be cost effective. But I would like that. Failing that, some nice models of Scorpio or Liberator.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All I've got is my little original Corgi silver one on the shelf up there.
I see you've got a nice clip gun up there as well, and a Federation pistol.
Yes. Yeah. For everyone there on audio that obviously can't see. Yeah, I've got a line of guns on the shelf behind me. I've got two Federation, a pistol and a rifle, the Liberator gun, and the Scorpio clip gun up there. Yeah, I love them to bits, especially the holstering sounds.
Yeah,
I've got to say it's worth every penny for that alone.
I love that they have different sounds. The Liberator drawn with that sort of hollow, plasticky click, and the clip guns have that like metallic rasp as they come out. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, 1,000 thank yous for coming on the podcast today, sir. I've really enjoyed it. I hope you have too.
I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Brilliant. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. And thanks to you guys out there for continuing to listen. Hopefully we'll be back very soon with another podcast. Take care, my friends. Goodbye.